You know when you watch a demolition crew take down one of those massive obsolete skyscrapers?
Oh, yeah, like a controlled implosion.
Exactly. They don't just like hit it with a wrecking ball anymore. They actually study the architecture.
Right, they have to find the weak points.
Well, actually, it's kind of the opposite, which is crazy. They find the exact load-bearing columns, the very structures that give the building its immense strength, and that is exactly where they place the explosive charges.
Oh, wow. So the structural integrity itself becomes the mechanism of destruction.
Yeah. The building literally falls because of its own weight. The very thing that made it great is what brings it down.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Thanks. And welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we're looking at human beings as those skyscrapers.
We are indeed.
Specifically, we're diving into how a 5th century Athenian playwright named Sophocles figured out how to place explosive charges on human pride.
And how his exploration of suffering and divine will still absolutely resonates with you today.
Exactly. And the real core of our mission today is to explore what happens when these uncompromising, rigid heroes of Greek myth collide with something totally different, the biblical worldview of grace and redemption.
It's a fascinating collision, really. You have two very different ways of understanding the universe. One relies on this, unyielding cosmic order, and the other introduces the radical concept of mercy.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to set the scene first, right? To understand the soil this all grew out of.
Absolutely. We are in 5th century BCE Athens.
Right, and this is a city that is just entirely intoxicated by its own power.
Oh, totally. They've got a booming democracy, a massive naval empire.
And this huge cultural explosion happening under leaders like Pericles.
Exactly. And right in the middle of all this civic pride, you have the city Dionysia.
The big festival.
Right, but to call the city Dionysia a festival almost undersells it, I think, to a modern audience. It was a massive spring celebration dedicated to the god Dionysus, sure, but its function in society was incredibly complex.
The best analogy I could think of while we were looking at the sources is that it was like a modern mashup of the Super Bowl, the Oscars, and like a high-stakes religious summit all rolled into one.
That's pretty accurate, actually.
And funding these plays was a system called the Tragia. It was literally a civic duty. Like, if you were wealthy, your taxes basically paid for the chorus.
Yes, and for the citizens sitting in the theater, attending wasn't just a weekend outing or entertainment. It was an act of political and spiritual participation.
Right, you're sitting there with, what, up to 14,000 other citizens?
Up to 14,000, yeah. And they were actively wrestling with the anxieties of their expanding empire.
Yeah.
These plays were where Athens came to think about justice, power, and, human limitation.
And at the absolute center of this cultural phenomenon was our guy Sophocles.
And Sophocles was not just some introverted writer locked in a garret somewhere.
Right. I was so surprised by this.
Far from it. What's fascinating here is that Sophocles was deeply embedded in the actual machinery of the Athenian Empire.
He was a general, right? Alongside Pericles.
Yes, a general, a state treasurer, and he even held a priesthood connected to a local hero cult.
Wow.
He lived for nearly a century, too, meaning he saw both the absolute zenith of Athens' golden age and its catastrophic unraveling during the Peloponnesian War.
Which, you can imagine how that shapes a person's writing. He wrote around 120 plays, right?
He did, though only 7 survive complete today.
Just 7?
Yeah, they were chosen by later Byzantine scholars as a sort of school canon for their educational merit.
So lucky for us we have those. But even within those 7, you can see how he fundamentally upgraded the technology of the theater itself.
Oh, absolutely. He expanded the chorus to 15 members, he introduced painted scenery, and, crucially, he introduced the 3rd actor.
Okay, wait, let me guess on this one. Before this, with only 2 actors on stage, everything is just binary.
Exactly. Just 2 people arguing.
Right, but if you add a 3rd actor, you create this sort of bystander effect. Suddenly, 2 characters can argue while a 3rd character, like maybe a son or a wife or a servant, just has to stand there and silently react.
He basically invented the awkward, tension-filled, dramatic triangle.
It's brilliant.
That is exactly the mechanism. It allows for triangulated tension, secrecy, shifting allegiances on stage. But, his real upgrade is in how he treats his characters.
How so?
They aren't just passive victims of the gods drifting through life. They are people of immense, terrifying will.
Okay, which brings me to a major pushback. Because I vividly remember sitting in high school English being taught that Greek heroes fall because they have a tragic flaw.
Yes. the classic tragedy flaw.
Right, like a moral kryptonite, a weak spot. Are you saying they aren't just stubborn or deeply flawed?
That high school English lesson is actually a massive modern misconception.
Wait, really? My teachers lied to me.
Well, mistranslated maybe. Scholars point out that the Greek concept of hamartia, which Aristotle wrote about, is inadequately translated as tragic flaw. It doesn't mean a moral failing at all.
So what does it mean?
It is much more accurate to describe it as a fatal error or a miscalculation that is rooted in the hero's excellence turned to excess.
Oh, back to the demolition metaphor.
Precisely. They don't fall because they have a weak point. They fall because they are supremely, inflexibly themselves.
So their greatest strength, like their uncompromising nature or their total dedication to truth or honor, is the load-bearing column that brings their whole life crashing down?
Exactly that.
So how does he actually build a play to showcase these skyscrapers collapsing? Let's look at two plays specifically from the sources, Ajax and Trachiniae, or The Women of Trachis.
Good choices.
In both of these, Sophocles does this really strange structural thing. Scholars call it a diptych shape.
Right, like a painting on two hinged panels.
Yeah, the play essentially pivots or breaks entirely in half. In Ajax, the play pivots around his suicide right in the middle of the story.
Very jarring for an audience.
And in Trachiniae, the first half is intimately focused on his wife, Deianira's quiet domestic anxiety. She's waiting for her husband, Heracles, to come home. She's worried he loves someone else.
She sends him a robe soaked in what she thinks is a love potion.
But she realizes too late it's poison. She dies. And then the second half of the play shifts entirely away from her over to Heracles, who is screaming in physical torment.
It's a complete shift in focus.
I have to ask, though, isn't a play that splits in half halfway through just like bad pacing? Or disunity?
It's easy to see it as disunity through a modern lens, sure, where we expect one smooth narrative arc. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a highly deliberate design.
What's the design trying to do?
Sophocles is juxtaposing two completely different perspectives to create a profound sense of scale.
Wait, so by putting quiet domestic drama right next to cosmic spectacle, is he trying to make the gods feel more distant or the human pain feel more intense?
Both, actually. He moves the audience from the personal dread of the domestic sphere straight into public, mythological spectacle.
Oh, wow.
It forces the audience to feel the massive gulf between the inner emotional world of the individual and the harsh, unyielding reality of the universe. He wants you to feel emotional whiplash.
And he doesn't just do this with plot structure, right? He does it with grammar. This totally blew my mind in the sources.
The linguistic aspect is incredible.
Yeah, linguistic scholars who study the deep grammar of these plays noticed that Sophocles is literally manipulating Greek verbs to control the audience's heart rate.
The manipulation of verbal aspect here is masterful. To understand this, we have to look at verbs not just as indicators of time, past, present, future, but as perspective.
Perspective, like a film director choosing camera angles.
That's a great way to put it. In ancient Greek, the aorist tense is often used to background events. It presents an action as a complete, undetailed whole.
Okay, so how does Sophocles use it?
He uses it like a wide shot to push the remote, mythic past into the background. It creates a sense of perfective remoteness.
Like saying, a long time ago, a prophecy was spoken in a faraway land. It's safe, it's distant.
Exactly, you feel insulated from it. But then, when he wants to zero in on the hero's current suffering, he shifts into the present or perfect tenses.
The close-up.
Right. This creates what linguists call imperfective proximity. He pulls the camera in for extreme close-up. He pulls the suffering right up to the audience's faces, making the emotional agony visceral.
So it feels like it's happening right then and there.
He makes it feel like it is unfolding immediately right now in the theater.
So he uses the safe, distant, wide shot to say, the oracle was spoken, but suddenly cuts to the extreme close-up to say, the poison is burning my flesh to the bone.
Yes. It creates a linguistic claustrophobia. You can't escape the suffering any more than the character can.
Ugh, linguistic claustrophobia. That's so intense. But if linguistic claustrophobia traps the audience in a character's suffering, what happens when two characters, who are both absolutely convinced they're right, are trapped in that same space together?
That is where Sophocles introduces the ultimate collision of laws.
Let's talk about Antigone, because this play perfectly captures the tension between civic obligation and higher moral imperatives.
It's the classic showdown.
Right. Antigone wants to bury her brother, Polynices, but he died attacking the city of Thebes. So the new king, Creon, issues a strict civic decree. No burial, leave his body for the birds and dogs.
It is the quintessential conflict between nomos, which is human convention, the laws of the state, and physis.
And physis is the divine order.
Right, exactly, the eternal unwritten laws of the gods regarding the dead.
And neither side will bend. Creon's own son, Haemon, who is actually engaged to Antigone, tries to reason with his father. He desperately tries to explain that the people of the city sympathize with Antigone.
He's pleading for compromise.
He literally tells Creon, there is no reverence when you spurn the gods. And Creon, who is completely trapped in his own absolute authority, screams back, abominable spirit, woman-led.
It's that inflexibility we talked about earlier. Creon's load-bearing column is his belief in absolute state authority and order.
He's terrified of anarchy.
Right. He believes if he compromises, the state collapses. He cannot bend even when his own son points out that he is violating a higher divine law.
And because he won't bend, the explosive charge detonates. He loses his son, he loses his wife, he loses his entire world.
All to protect his idea of order.
And, when we talk about inflexibility and the tragic pursuit of being right, we have to talk about the ultimate investigator, Oedipus Rex.
Oh, Oedipus.
The king who vows to find the murderer of the previous king to lift a plague from his city, only to discover, step by agonizing step, that he is the killer. He killed his father and married his mother.
It really is the ultimate detective story, where the detective is relentlessly hunting himself.
Right, and every single person around him, his wife, the prophets, the shepherds, they all start to figure it out before he does. They literally beg him to stop investigating.
But his excellence, his brilliant intellect that solved the riddle of the Sphinx, his total commitment to the truth, it won't let him stop.
He forces the final witness to speak.
And that is the tragedy of knowledge in Sophocles. Oedipus's physical sight actually masked his profound ignorance.
Because he could see the physical world clearly, but he was entirely blind to his own identity.
Exactly. It is only when he discovers the horrifying truth and physically blinds himself that he gains true insight. But the insight is devastating.
But Sophocles doesn't just leave him there in the dark, and this is crucial. Years later, at the very end of his own life, Sophocles writes Oedipus at Colonus.
A completely different tone.
Oedipus is now this polluted, exiled, blind old man wandering the earth. But by the end of this play, he is transformed. He is absorbed into the earth and becomes a blessed, protective spirit for the city of Athens.
That transformation is so important for understanding the Greek mind. It shows that enduring immense, unmerited suffering could eventually confer kind of special grace.
Like he earns it through the pain.
In a way, Oedipus becomes a figure of numinous power. His suffering burns away his pride, his worldly attachments, and leaves behind a deep, protective wisdom that actually secures the borders of Athens.
Now, here is where we need to look at the broader theological landscape.
Because the contrast is fascinating.
It is, because when we take these incredible, unyielding Greek tragedies and compare them to the biblical worldview, we see some profound overlaps in how they diagnose the human condition, but a massive fundamental collision in the cure.
The resonances are definitely there in the diagnosis, for sure. Both the ancient Greek and the biblical worldviews recognize the utterly destructive power of pride.
Yes, hubris. It echoes perfectly with Proverbs 16.1. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall.
Both worlds completely agree that human beings have severe limits. And when we try to play God, when we assume we can control our own destinies, disaster strikes.
But the underlying mechanism of the universe, like the way the cosmos responds to that fall, is where they diverge sharply.
Absolutely. In Sophocles, the gods are distant. They are impersonal enforcers of cosmic order.
They aren't going to comfort you.
Not at all. Apollo issues an oracle, and it will come true. Period. There is no relational forgiveness.
Right. If you break the unwritten laws, whether intentionally or accidentally, like Oedipus did, you are crushed by nemesis, divine retribution.
The machine of fate does not care about your apologies.
And because there is no mechanism for mercy or atonement, the characters' responses to their ultimate failures are totally different. Think about how these plays end.
They're bleak.
Very. When Ajax realizes he's been driven mad by Athena and humiliated in front of his peers, he takes his own life. When Antigone is trapped alive in the cave, she hangs herself.
And in the pagan Greek worldview, this suicide is portrayed as a tragic, but ultimately noble assertion of honor.
Because the world has taken their agency, so they take it back the only way they can.
This raises an important question about how early Christian thinkers, who were educated in this classical literature, interacted with it. Because from a biblical perspective, despair is met with the possibility of redemption.
Exactly. Early church fathers wrestled deeply with these texts. Writers like Augustine in his City of God and Tertullian directly critiqued this pagan ideal of heroic suicide.
They argued that it wasn't a noble assertion of honor at all.
No, they viewed it as a tragic consequence of a worldview that had no eternal hope. I mean, if there is no concept of a personal God who can offer actual atonement,
If there's no grace to cover the shame.
then of course, grim acceptance of fate or self-destruction seems like the only logical exit.
The biblical worldview centers on the cross, which operates on a completely inverted logic.
How so?
It takes the ultimate public shame, the ultimate suffering, and transforms it into glory. It offers a path where failure, guilt, and the collapse of those load-bearing columns do not have to end in self-destruction. The suffering can be redeemed.
But what's fascinating is that the early Christians didn't just throw Sophocles out. They didn't just cancel him.
Right, they saw the value in his observations.
Thinkers like Clement of Alexandria suggested that Christians can spoil the Egyptians, which is this cool metaphor for taking the valuable insights and treasures from classical literature and using them for a higher purpose.
They realized they could look at these brilliant, terrifying Greek motifs of pride and tragic downfall and use them to point to the necessity of Christ's humility.
They recognized the acute psychological truth in Sophocles' work, even if they fundamentally disagreed with his theology.
It's a very sophisticated, empathetic way to engage with culture. You affirm the accurate diagnosis of the human condition, the reality of shame, the pain of isolation, the genuine danger of human hubris, while offering a completely different prescription for the cure.
So let's bring this right down to the ground.
Practical application time.
Exactly. What does this all mean for you? If you're listening to this on your commute or, while you're folding laundry, why should you care about a bunch of plays written 2,500 years ago by an Athenian general?
Because they function as a mirror. The architecture of human nature hasn't fundamentally changed since the 5th century BCE.
Right. Reading Sophocles today forces you to examine your own modern load-bearing columns. It makes you look closely at your own idols.
Are you building your life on the absolute necessity of career success?
Or on an illusion of absolute self-reliance? Are you, like Creon, so inflexible in your need to be right, so committed to your own rules, that you are actively alienating the people you love?
It also cultivates a profound empathy, I think.
In what way?
Well, when you read a play like Sophocles' Electra, where the main character is absolutely consumed by trauma, trapped in cycles of grief and bitterness over the murder of her father, you gain a deeper understanding for people in your own life who are stuck.
You see the psychological toll of unresolved anger and how it can completely paralyze a person.
Exactly.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive. In the ancient world, people were terrified of the oracles.
These unyielding, impersonal forces that dictated their fates and punished their flaws without mercy.
Right. Today, we don't have oracles at Delphi, but we do live in a modern, technology-driven world heavily governed by algorithms and artificial intelligence.
That is a fascinating parallel. We are building systems of artificial logic that, much like the Greek gods, enforce rules without empathy.
Algorithms that decide who gets a loan, who gets hired, or what information shapes our reality.
So what happens when our human flaws collide with them?
Exactly. What happens when the unyielding, inflexible heroes of our modern age, our flaws, our pride, our human errors, collide with these new impersonal digital oracles? We operate under the assumption that we can life hack our way out of pain, that we can engineer flawless systems to control our destinies.
But Sophocles warns us that overconfidence in our own systems is the very essence of tragedy.
If we engineer a society that optimizes for absolute efficiency and merciless logic, are we just building a modern stage for an ancient tragedy?
If we forget how to handle our own flaws with grace, the systems we build certainly won't do it for us.
Something to think about the next time you feel a little too confident in your own plans.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Sophocles, the architecture of human pride, and the collision of worldviews. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.